Hey pizza patrons, I get a lot of questions about how to properly stretch out pizza dough. So I thought I would make it a whole video here on Patreon so you can really see the process. It is pretty simple though, and once you figure it out, you're going to feel so empowered. Trust me. All right, so I went ahead and already made some overnight pizza dough, and it is ready. This stuff has been sitting and waiting for me to stretch it. So here's what you do. First of all, you want a nice floured countertop, and if you're using a baking steel or stone in the oven that's been preheating, you want to have your pizza peel or whatever you're going to use to launch it onto that hot stone or steel ready right here, because you're going to flour that as soon as you're close to having your dough all stretched out. Okay, so we're going to work one dough ball at a time. So I'm going to re-roll this one, a little flour. I'll put it to the side. The dough balls I'm not using, I always cover with an upside down bowl. I just find that that keeps the moisture in and it doesn't waste so much plastic. Some people use a lot of plastic wrap for that. I just would rather just use a bowl that I can reuse. All right, so there's the one we're gonna stretch. This one's gonna go over here. Okay. If your dough feels a little tacky, go ahead and sprinkle it with some flour. And also, if your dough has been sitting out like this one has, it might have some bubbles. Go ahead and squash them. Trust me. So I'm just squashing the bubbles right now. All right. Up to you if you want to use a rolling pin for the first part of this. I like to use my fingers. Okay, you start with a ball, and then you're going to put it on your floured countertop. You're going to use your fingers like this to just press it out into a rough 6-inch circle. Try and keep it flat. This presses out any unwanted bubbles, because if the dough has too many bubbles, the toppings will fall off as it bakes, because it'll go and all the toppings will go all over. So trust me, you don't want all the bubbles. You just want them around the edges. All right, so here this is pressing that out. I'm even going to use my whole hand because this dough has been sitting out a bit. But that will make it extra good for stretching, because one of the biggest problems people have is when their dough is too cold. So if you made a 1-hour pizza dough, like my weeknight pizza dough, and it just hasn't had that much time to ferment, you're gonna have a hard time stretching it, because dough needs that time to develop a really nice network and elasticity. This overnight dough has got plenty of time to ferment and to develop that elasticity. This has been rising about, I think it fermented for about 20 hours, and now it's been sitting out on the counter for about 1 hour. So it is perfectly at room temperature. If you buy your pizza dough at the store, which is again, totally fine, it usually comes refrigerated. So make sure that before you even try to stretch it, unless you love being frustrated, make sure that you let it come fully to room temperature before you stretch it. Okay, so I'm gonna try and stretch mine out a little bit right on the counter like this. You put your hand down and you kind of pull around it. This is gonna start to develop a nice crust around the edge. And pick it up and just feel where it's a little uneven. The goal here is to make it as even as possible. And you're gonna need some patience and you're gonna need some Zen time, and you can't rush this process. I know we all have seen videos of people online at pizzerias flipping their dough up in the air, but those people do that every day. We don't. Well, sometimes I do. All right, so then you put it back down and you just keep going through these motions. You're aiming, this is half of a recipe of my overnight dough. So this piece of dough can make a 12 to 14 inch pizza, more or less depending. If you have a smaller piece of dough, you're going for a smaller round or rectangle, whatever size you want. But I am going for about a 14 inch. So I'm just gonna go nice and slow. Once you have a nice shape and it's pretty even, you're gonna pick it up in one hand like this. See how I'm holding my hand like this and I've got the dough over top of it. And then you just wanna gently tug at the bottom. Just give it a little gentle tug. Everything is gentle. All your movements are nice and slow. Because again, we are not pizzeria owners here who are doing 25 pizzas in an hour. We are home pizza makers and we're not in a rush. We're just gonna gently stretch this beautiful homemade pizza dough. All right, so if it starts to get sticky, you're gonna put it down on your floured countertop again. Now, one tip I have that sometimes even I break is that I try and keep the flour only on one side of the pizza, the side of the pizza that's going down on the peel. That helps reduce the risk of flour in your toppings. But I mean, if you happen to get some flour on the top of the pizza, it's not gonna be that big of a deal. I just like to try if I can. So the most you'll ever see me tossing a pizza is like this, ready? So you put your two fists underneath the pizza and then you just kind of give it a gentle toss. And it does help the pizza dough stretch out a little better if you kind of make it move a little more. I have tried to toss it, but I am not that great at it yet. And I'm okay with that. I kind of like this more gradual thing. So you can see it's getting pretty big. I don't think it's quite at 14 inches yet, but it's getting there. And you can see how you just kind of move it around, whichever way feels good to you. I like doing this. Sometimes once it gets bigger, I put it over my forearm like this and tug. But the key here is to look through your pizza dough. You can see, if you look through it, where it's a little chunkier in places. And those places you want to even out. And ways to do that, you can put it on your counter like this, and you can kind of just press on the place that's a little too thick and just gently stretch it until it's nice and even all the way around. If you like a big crust like I do, you know, you're going to grab it there and just pull like so that around the edges you have a nice crust, but in the middle it's nice and thin. I'm going to grab just a little bit more flour from my countertop. And again, just keep that flour on one side, only on one side. And that's it. Thank you so much for tuning in and supporting me and Thursday Night Pizza. I cannot wait to keep making pizza together.